Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
Frank from Tested.
And this week we're starting a new week of build. This is our series where we start a project that usually takes about 4 to 5 days to finish. And the first one goes out to you guys, everyone on YouTube, and you can follow along the entire build on Tested.com, brought to you by premium members. And this week we are going to talk about airbrushing.
Yeah. We've covered airbrushing a little bit before when we did the model kit painting and stuff like that, but I thought it would be a really good opportunity to give just another quick 101 kind of how to start using an airbrush, because they can be a little bit intimidating.
Absolutely. We've done some airbrushing before, both in the office and with Adam, like that Cosmonaut model kit. And when I jumped into that, you know, it definitely felt daunting. Like there was not only the technique of using the airbrush, but also kind of what paints to use, when do you use an airbrush, and when do you want to use just a hand brush, and anything else. So where do we begin?
Well, we begin with the equipment, which is an airbrush and a compressor. This is the SmartJet from Iwata, and this is a Revolution from Iwata. This is kind of my go-to kind of setup because this compressor is a pretty tough one, so it's good for me in the workshop, and it won't burn out too quickly. Like sometimes if you get like cheap Harbor Freighty kind of ones, you'll burn out the compressor. You can also use, if you have a big compressor in the workshop, you can use a regulator and dial it down to do this. So if you have that, it works too.
Right. I think that's what Adam uses, because it's his massive shop compressor that he uses for everything from his shop vac to even like cleaning himself. So when you're shopping for a compressor, reliability, the thing you want to go, Iwata, you trust them. But also, what about other technical specifications?
Well, this one has a regulator on it, and it has a dial up on the top that tells you what your PSI is. Typically, I don't really go so much by what the PSI is, but more by what the feel is, and it usually ends up being around like 20, 22 PSI. But having stuff down that operates well down at like 7.5, 7.8 PSI is good. It's rare that I go over 25, 30 PSI, so you don't need something super strong, just something that the motor's not going to burn out from running all the time.
And are these compressors one that, as you're airbrushing, needs to compress more? Will some last longer, store more pressure, and then some need to kind of replenish itself more regularly?
Some of them come with tanks, so they don't need to run all the time. This one has like an auto shut off, so like right now it's silent, but if I start using it, it kicks in a little bit. So some of them run all the time, and some of them just kick in when it's needed.
Now let's talk about the airbrush. This is the Revolution model, you said? And it is one of your go-to airbrushes. We have covered airbrushes before a little bit, but let's recap. This is a 2-action?
Yeah, this is dual action, so that means the first action is air, which is just pushing down on the button. You can kind of hear it. And then the second action is paint, which is pulling back on the trigger. So there's not really much in the way of like feathering the air pressure with the pushing down. It's just an on-off, but the paint, you can control how much paint is being put out by pulling back. And so that's where kind of the tricky, getting used to using an airbrush and holding it the right way. I've seen people try and use them with their thumbs, or there's all kinds of different things, but the normal kind of way is just holding it like this and getting used to that pushing down and pulling back action. There's also single action airbrushes where the paint is dialed in from either at the tip or in the back, and when you press the air, it all happens at the same time, so that you don't really have that degree of fine control as you do with the dual action airbrush.
And that secondary action is for the spread of the paint, like how wide?
It's for the amount of paint. It's the needle being pulled out of the little cone, and the more that needle goes out, the more paint is allowed to fly out of the needle.
Does that change like the distribution or just the intensity?
A little bit of both. Yeah.
Very cool. And then using the airbrush. So you buy a compressor, you buy the airbrush itself, you hook them up, you got to put paint in it.
Yeah, there's a couple different kinds of paint delivery. There's this is called a gravity fed, because you put it in the top here, and the gravity puts it down into the needle. And then there's other ones that are siphon feed that have little bottles that hang off the bottom, and that air pressure blowing by that opening sucks the paint in and blows it out. With the gravity feeds, you can use much lower air pressure because it doesn't need to suck the paint out of a bottle. So when you're doing finer things, this is a little bit more controllable. So that's your paint delivery.
All right. And then mixing paints, like what kind of paints can you put in here?
You could put a lot of different kinds of paints. Like as a makeup artist, I've put a lot of different kinds of makeups, silicone-based makeups and alcohol-based makeups. I've run automotive paints through my airbrushes, things like urethanes and lacquers and stuff like that. We're going to be using just water-based acrylics today, just because it's easiest, safest, and we're going to use paints that are made for airbrushing but can also be used with a regular brush.
Cool. Can we get a quick demo, for example? Let's put some paint in here and let's show just on our white sheets what the spread is going to be like and what pressing down all the way is going to feel like and look like. So you have paint right now.
Yeah.
And what do you have here?
This is just a translucent red.
Aha, right there.
Sorry. This is the brand from ComArt. It's just a very good liquidy water-based airbrush paint that's not too thick, not too thin.
Now how much are you putting in there?
I'm just putting a tiny little bit in there. You can just a couple of drops. Okay. You don't need a ton.
It's like 2 or 3 drops. Yeah, you can show over a shoulder right there.
Right
nice.
There. Yeah.
Nice.
Just a little bit. So you put that on there, shove your cap on, and then pushing down on it, see nothing's coming out. That's your single action, your first action. So you could do this and
it's just air.
You should be safe. As long as your airbrush is clean and you're not if you're clogged, it'll start spattering and it'll do funny things. But if it's clean and it's fine, just air. Now as you start pulling back slowly, paint will come out. And so if I'm just pulling back a little bit, see it's just fine little amounts of paint that are coming out. Mm-hmm. If I go farther away, that same little bit, see how it's just like a fine mist right in here?
Yep.
So that's not altering the amount of paint, that's altering the distance you are from the thing now.
Ah, so the distance between you and the subject, that's the spread.
Yeah, so if I'm doing that same little bit of paint and I get real close, I can do these fine little lines.
And you're only pulling back just a little bit.
Yeah, so you can get soft little dots, you can get this spread, or you can get these fine little lines. And if you want to just go nuts, you could just pull it all the way back and you can give it a big spray. So if you're spraying something big and you want to get a lot of coverage, you can just get it going.
Wow. And that's pulling back and pulling all the way back.
But that's the difference in your control is you can get these tiny little lines or you get these big giant sprays, and you don't have to do that with adjusting anything. Once you train your hand and kind of get the coordination to do all these things, you don't need to keep fiddling with stuff. You can just do it all with one airbrush and kind of transition from one style of painting to another.
So it really is moving distance,
and
also how far you pull back the secondary action, and over practice, over time, practice, and that will get you to it.
A real easy way to practice that I always try and advise people to do especially when they're starting out, is learn how to do just dots, and you want to try and get them all to about the same size. So that gets you used to just pulling back that first tiny little bit, and then maybe do another set of dots a little bit larger. So you're not just training yourself to do these tiny little dots, you're training how to do these medium-sized dots. And so you can hit that size and shape repeatedly all the time.
Got it.
Same thing with lines. If you do a line and you keep the same relative thickness the whole time.
That's much harder than it looks.
It is, but these are the kind of things that if you're just starting out in airbrushing, that's a really easy way to practice to use the control, is to try and get the same intensity line or dots.
Right. So do you find that, because I'm finding I start too heavy, because I linger, and then I trail off. So to get a consistent line, he's got to commit kind of to the. Oh, very cool. Nice.
That's just the basic, like how to get used to the control of the airbrush. You could, I've seen people that get into doing things like drawing a circle and shading a circle to look like.
Give it some depth.
Yeah.
Spheres. Turn your circle into a sphere.
Yep.
Oh.
Stuff like that.
That's fun.
It's trickier than it seems, but this is all stuff that you could do with just, you practice this half a dozen times,
Yeah.
a couple dozen times. You'll eventually get the hang of how to be comfortable with the airbrush, and you'll get comfortable with how to hold it correctly. You know, and some people do prefer to use this thing with their thumb. I don't. But I've seen people that do it, and they do it pretty well.
Back and
yeah, it's just it's tricky. The right way to do it is really with your finger
with your
on it
index
like
finger.
this. Yeah.
Okay. Are there different airbrush designs where the trigger is in a different place?
I have an airbrush that has a trigger feed, like pulling.
Got it.
You know, like a gun or whatever.
Right.
It's a bigger airbrush. It's called an Iwata TH. That's what I painted the Rancor with. And that's for doing bigger stuff. I think Iwata has a couple of versions that are about this size that have triggers also. But this is really kind of the normal, double action airbrush. And I've had a Revolution for a long time, and before that I had an Eclipse, which is very similar. It's got a different size needle in it. And I've had an Eclipse for 10, 12 years.
Wow.
You know, so these things are workhorses,
yeah,
as long as you clean them right.
Yes. The amount, just 3 drops of paint. We got a lot, and there's still a lot in here. I can go for a while.
Yeah.
When you want to switch out to a different color, what do you do?
Well, you want to dump out the old paint. There's not too much in there.
That's still at least a drop or two left.
Then Iwata has these little cleaner things that are it's just super convenient. It's wipes in a spray bottle to help kind of get all that paint residue out.
And you're going to wipe the tip and also the inside?
Yeah.
It's like a baby wipe.
It's got like a soapy, detergent-y kind of cleaner.
And then you have to clean that up completely just to get all out of the system?
Yeah. You can run water or whatever you want through this. Typically what I'll do is I'll run 99% alcohol through this afterwards. You got a paper towel?
Yep, I do.
Thanks.
Having the right supplies.
Even though this guy it's all the way clean now, I like to give it a little rinse of 99% alcohol. It just gets any residues out of there.
And you're doing that just non-stop every time you switch colors?
Pretty much. I mean, unless you're mixing a color in there that can just be, you can just kind of stir it up in there and then go with the next color. And then when you're cleaning the color out, if you put your finger on the end of the airbrush like this and you pull back, it back bubbles. So what it does is it forces that air back up through the needle and into the reservoir.
And then
so
you
if
can
there's
wipe that out.
Yeah, if there's paint in there, that kind of just back bubbles all that paint out. And quickly swapping these colors and cleaning this out fast like this, it's kind of an important thing that you need to do to upkeep this tool. It's not really that hard. Like we're already done cleaning this color out. We can move into another color.
Right.
So you need to know how to quickly change those colors and how to maintain the airbrush so that it'll last you a long time. These aren't super expensive. It's only like about $100 for this airbrush. Compressor's a few $100s on top of that. So it's not a huge investment, but that's a tool that you could have for years and years and years if you just take care of it.
Well, we're also going to shoot another video that you guys can look forward to where Frank's going to take apart an airbrush and show you just some more in-depth, proper maintenance.
I'm going to field strip an airbrush.
Field strip an airbrush. That's going to be in a future video, but since this is a week of build, we want to work on a project. Now, earlier you mentioned that you use a big Iwata airbrush, and that's what you use to paint the Rancor.
Yeah.
The Rancor project, the giant Rancor that you built for Comic-Con this year. Now, we don't have a big airbrush here, and we don't have a big Rancor, but why don't we paint another Rancor?
Yeah.
Let's do a smaller Rancor. What we got here is a tiny Rancor. I think this is like the Star Wars Black Series Rancor. And I bought this at Comic-Con and brought it to your shop. I'm like, Frank, you were the Rancor. Look how cool this Rancor is. And you're like, it looks pretty cool, but I bet you could make it look cooler.
Yeah. I don't really like the paint job.
You don't like the paint job?
No, I used to work in the toy industry, so I understand how when you make a prototype and they do a paint up for it for the the prototype, they often look really good, and that's what you see on the package of the box. But then sometimes when they go to the factories, sometimes the paint jobs don't look as good.
Well, they got to send it overseas, and it's got an assembly line.
Yeah, and I think that this one, I think it could use a little bit of love. Like some of it, like see on the face here, it's all this like dry brushed highlight, and then there's another color dry brushed here, and then the shoulders are for some reason glossy, and the arms aren't, and this has like a wipe away brown in it, and like it's very disjointed when it comes to how this guy is painted and colored. So
repainting your toys. It's not something we've dabbled in with before, but I love the idea. So let's repaint some Star Wars toys. That's what this week of build is going to be. Let's repaint some Star Wars toys. You have a Rancor. I'd love to see you get started. Is there anything I can help out with?
I think you need to have a toy to work on also.
I do. I got a Jabba. Came with the same kit.
Yep.
A Rancor and Jabba. This guy looks okay,
Yeah.
It's a decent sculpt. And I think like the ridges here are gonna be cool to pull out some colors and details. But like the face definitely could use some improvement, like in the eyes. So I will tackle this Jabba in my own way, maybe not the best, and you're gonna take on the Rancor. We may not finish today, but we're gonna go into the next day.
Yeah.
But where should we start?
I think we need to start with redoing the base colors because it's got so many different things. I know you got glossy and matte, and some of this, this is dry brushed on top. There's just too many different things going on. So I want to repaint him completely.
Okay.
I think your character could be painted just as touch-ups.
Oh.
Because I think that these colors aren't totally horrible, but I think if you made it just a little bit more like some of the photos that you've pulled up online, you can just do little touch-ups to it instead of repainting it from scratch like I'm going to do on the Rancor.
So you think like this green here, it looks okay?
I think it's fine, and if you take a brown wash, remember when we did the model kits?
I want to definitely
and you put it in and then you wipe it away?
Yes, I want to do that for these.
That'll
these
bring out
here.
the wrinkles a lot, and then if you like all these yellows and tans, it needs some more like reds and a couple of variations of yellows to kind of just model in some of those little color differences.
Okay, I think the highlights here, I'm going to repaint that.
I think you could work with what's there and just modify it. Where I'm going to repaint the whole thing.
Okay, now I'm going to let you get started.
Okay.
And I'm going to grab some paint. I'm going to just experiment, learn as we go, and we're going to watch you get started repainting this Rancor. I'm super excited about this.
Pick some colors.
Yeah, choose some colors. I'm going to choose, I got some pictures of Jabba right here. So I'm going to use that and use it as a reference. Aha.
Reference is always really important when you do any of this stuff. Like especially if you're trying to replicate something that's already existing. There's so much good stuff out there already for the Star Wars characters. For me, like things like Admiral Akbar and the Rancor, like I've studied them so much trying to replicate them for the Rancor project and for Adam and all that stuff. Like I feel that I know these pretty well. Jabba, he's got a lot of interesting things going on with him though.
Yeah. Now, how do you decide between when to stop airbrushing and when to go with the hand brush?
Really good painters can paint with a hand brush that will look like an airbrush, or airbrush, and people will think it's hand brushed. So being able to kind of interchange those techniques, that's a strength that people look for.
Are you gonna do all airbrush today?
I'm gonna do a little bit of everything on this.
Okay.
Like I don't think that there's ever a time where you're just like, oh, this is all airbrush or this is all hand painted.
All right. Well, let's. I'm just gonna stop talking and let you get started, and I'm gonna go find some colors for Jabba.
When I painted the full-size Rancor, I remember the first tone that I put on was kind of a milk chocolatey color. So the first thing I'm gonna do is kind of a chocolate-ish.
Ah, this looks familiar. This is the Tim Gore's Bloodlines.
Yeah.
Which we used before. I like the Ogre a lot. Ogre and Decay.
You should. You're probably going to want some of this color with Jabba's face.
Okay.
I made that little list of the colors for Tim Gore's paints.
Nice.
It's a good idea to do that with any colors that aren't red, blue, yellow, gray. Like when it gets into like things that you have to remember the names, and especially when they're named kind of funny things like Tim Gore's paints.
Right.
I love them, but sometimes I can't remember what those colors are supposed to be.
It makes sense.
And you know, a lot of times you can look on the cap to see what color the paint is, but with some of these, they're just so dark you can't tell the difference.
Injury ochre, decay. That looks super cool. Vile green. Oh, that's a perfect color. I'm gonna give him some of that. Surgery sienna. Maybe that's to pop up a little bit of that red. Blunt trauma umber. Okay. Okay. Goes. Oops. Frank, are these all matte finishes?
For the most part, I'm pretty sure that they're matte finishes. I haven't noticed anything different.
Alright.
But there's also gloss and matte mediums you can add to these things to change them if you want something that's not gloss or matte.
Now, a problem I had early on when last time we were trying this was just find out where the paint was actually hitting. Right, like I could use a laser sight on this thing. Now, like, where is it hitting? And then once I find out where it's hitting, then it gets too much on one particular spot.
Yeah.
So it's just practice.
You know, also building up your colors in layers. You know, not just blast all out at once. Build it up over a couple of thinner layers sometimes is good.
That's why I'm doing the bottom first.
Yeah.
Can't see it, so I'm going to experiment.
Try out your colors.
Yep, try out the colors in the bottom.
Did you ever modify any of your toys as a kid?
Totally. Mostly break them, swap heads. Use a lot of tape, put tape on them.
You know, this is kind of an awful lot like when you build like model kits like Gundams and stuff. A lot of people don't just build the Gundam right out of the box. They do a lot of modifying to it, you know, building parts and stuff. We should do a Gundam.
We should do a Gundam.
I want to do a Gundam.
Let's definitely do a Gundam.
That'll be a 2 week of builds.
Depends on what size. We collaborate. Spend a whole day just popping the pieces out and organizing. Marathon build.
Looks so funny in the camera versus what it looks
Oh.
like. We're getting into color differences again.
Yep. Don't worry, we'll show some photos as well. Try the diseased umber. Ooh, bubbly. I mean, when you're color matching is just a whole other thing. Like,
yeah.
if you go,
what your lighting is like color matching's tricky. Well, that's something that's always an issue with makeup also, is that the makeup, when you do a makeup like in the trailer, it might not be the same colors. It might not look the same on the set if the colors in the trailer versus on set are different.
Right.
You know,
the camera.
Yeah. That's why some makeups look really good in person but not in photos, or vice versa.
It's a little very greenish, ochre.
Get my chocolate Rancor.
How long is that paint going to take to set?
I mean, it dries pretty quick. It's acrylic, so you know it typically dries fast. You know what you might want to do instead of blasting like big stuff around? See all these colors like around in here? They're like more small, like noodly kind of stuff.
It's just in the crevices.
Yeah, don't really follow any lines, but see how I'm just kind of like swerving in and out? It's almost like when you take your finger and you just kind of jiggle it around.
Right.
So like that kind of a thing?
Nice.
Like small and tight like that. And that kind of gives that transition instead of just blotches of stuff.
I'm going to try doing that all the way around the edge.
Yeah.
I like that color too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good color to break up the edge of this tan into the green. Because where this is just, it looks like from the factory, they just sprayed that tan color on there. There's all this overwash into here. If you break that up with this, it'll kind of give a good transition.
Silence. Work. Artists at work. Gotta make your chocolate Rancor.
Yep.
Pick this guy up. It's fun to do it with your toys. And then,
this is a different way of playing with your toys.
yes, totally. There it goes. So I'm gonna practice drilling line a little bit.
I've seen other people that take their toys and they'll
Take it
like,
apart.
Well, they'll add, well, not only take it apart, but they'll add like epoxy putties or something on it.
Oh yeah, Bondo.
Yeah.
Sculpt on top, basically. And you can do it with Sculpey also. Just gotta bake it afterward.
Yeah, but you can get like plumber's epoxy, like just that it's like it comes in a stick and you just cut off a little. Then you can just resculpt details and stuff.
Goes. Squiggly line.
Does that help a little bit? Does that make a little
totally.
more sense?
Absolutely. And I like that I don't have to, I'm not tracing through anything. I'm just kind of making a transition. Because what is job life not diseased?
Right?
Disease is like his default state.
This thing. You excited for the new movie?
Oh my god, I was just going to say, by the time this video comes out, we'll be real close. No spoilers. Yeah, totally. I mean, the new movie I'm excited for. I'm just...
Well, now you're coming, this is cutting across the front of that color, you want to bring it up.
Bring it here?
Yeah. I mean, you won't see it, but
Yeah.
yeah, you want to do it on the edge of the tan color, the transition between the green. Yeah.
Okay. I was just practicing, Frank.
Yep.
Everything's a practice. Did you practice on your toys?
You know, I don't remember doing this as a kid.
Well, airbrushes are, you know.
I would build forts for them. I think that's how you build like big
Cardboard,
build your own play sets, and
dioramas.
Stuff. Yeah,
play sets are always the best.
I remember with Ninja Turtles, I would take cardboard like toilet rolls and build tunnels and
sewers.
Yeah, you do a shoebox and then toilet rolls
in
between. That's how you did Ninja Turtles.
Oh, jeez. Gotta make sure there's enough paint in there. What about safety?
Well, it's always a good idea to work in a well-ventilated room. This is a big enough place, and we're just spraying little bits of paint around, so we're not really in danger. But you know, if you're in a small bedroom or something like that with the windows closed, and all of a sudden you're spraying for hours and hours, you're going to be in all kinds of particulates of paint. So, well-ventilated area is always a good idea. If you're using paint that's not necessarily good for you, like I'm getting paint on my fingers, so you know, maybe gloves.
Yep. This is all watercolor.
Yeah, it's all water-based acrylic. Like this isn't like I can wash this off with soap and water, so it's not a huge deal. But it's a good idea to wear things like gloves, and if you have, you know, a tendency to point things at your eye, maybe wear some safety glasses.
Do you have a tendency to point things at your eye?
So I don't know.
I got glasses. I'm all right.
Some people, no matter what they do, they're still going to get paint in their eye.
All right, Frank, I'm just going to practice more of these lines.
Now, if you want to repaint a toilet like this, you don't need to have a whole airbrush and everything set up. You can also hand paint it all.
Yeah, now you've gone to the hand painting your base coat.
No, I just want to show that like you could do it both ways. This I'm using, this is a Nova color. It's a pretty well-loved little jar of paint here.
Yeah.
But I love Nova acrylics, especially for brushing, and I'm just mixing it straight with the airbrush colors that I was using, and you can just hand brush it on too. You know, because all we're doing is really kind of putting a new base coat on the whole thing.
It's okay if any is like you don't get a 100% full coverage. You already had.
It's fine to do either way. Like I said, you should be able to airbrush just as well as your base coat, or just as well as your hand paint. And for a base coat, it really doesn't need anything fancy. So I just thought of doing it with the Nova just now.
Now, I was having difficulty drawing the lines, and you said that could be because of clogging. So how often should I clean that tip of the airbrush?
Well, if you notice that you're starting to get little spatters then that probably means that paint is drying in the needle between where the needle and the little cone is in there. And so to flush it out with some alcohol or clean it out or just wipe off the tip sometimes is good enough to get rid of that.
Okay. What do you recommend for Java's face?
He's got a lot of these like reddish colors in there too, like reddy browns.
Can I make use of this ochre anywhere? Should I just
You should
zigzag
probably
around?
continue what you're doing.
Real fine?
Yeah.
All right.
Get smaller.
Okay, let's get real close up, right?
Mm-hmm. It's where you get into, airbrush control. It's just putting that tiny little bit of paint on there with the brush really close.
Be real careful with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I find that even helps just like almost keep the airbrushing hand steady and move the object around it.
If that's what works best for you, yeah.
So I can I don't have to move my hand too much. I'm just focusing on that pinpoint.
Well, I'm pretty close to having the Rancor all rebased out. And once this paint dries, then ready to start doing some other stuff.
What's your next step? What's after you finish that base coat?
I think it's to start doing some darker colors. I know in the video it looks like he's practically black already.
Yeah, splattering. Splattering, splattering. I don't want that at all. I think I should work my way in from Java, outward in, like I have this like ring of ochre.
Well, see, if you look at the way that the picture is, I don't know that he's got. I think you're following that a little bit too literally. I think that if you took this,
I'll work out along the outside. Okay.
Yeah, because right now it's just you only have kind of a line going on, but you have to
blend that in.
Yeah, kind of bring it out a little bit more.
Fancy. Yeah, we'll show people.
Does that start to make sense?
No, like, totally. So, Rick added more there, more around the face. And let's follow your lead. So dark colors next for you, and that's airbrushing or hand brushing?
A little bit of both.
Gross. Slimy. When you're painting this Rancor, and then you painted the big one, and we didn't talk too much about how you painted the rest of that big Rancor. Where are the challenging spots for that?
You know, there's not really much of a challenge in the paint job because it's like when I did the big one, it was pretty much just basing it out and then kind of going in and noodling in all the little details. And a lot of it was just putting in some color and then wiping it down kind of thing. So it's not really a challenging paint job at all. It's actually a really simple paint job.
It's pretty forgiving.
Yeah. You know, for this thing right now, I'm just trying to get it all kind of based out in the same sort of tone range.
I like Jabba's hands. They're clearly a dude in like a hand suit.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. it's the same with like the original picture. Like,
it's clearly just a pair of gloves sticking out of
gloves
his...
sticking out. Look at your armpits.
You know, I think designs like Jabba and the Rancor are just so awesome, and it's just indicative of how Phil was such a great creature designer in Jedi.
Yeah.
Phil Tippett was the one that designed the Rancor and Jabba and a whole bunch of the other monsters.
What do those original sketches look like? Because it's designed to be puppeted.
I haven't seen a ton of the original sketches, but I remember seeing a ton of maquettes. Because I think more than doing sketches, I think that Phil and his crew were just kind of banging out a bunch of little maquettes of ideas. I remember seeing in the archives there's just a whole bunch of shelves with all those little maquettes of all the different characters, and you can see like, you know, the original concept for Akbar and all that other stuff. It's
Sculpting.
It's really great.
Yeah, I'm just gonna make him real gross. I'm like, the way I'm thinking of it now is that he has this, you know, kind of bright green original paint job. I'm just like darkening it up and ochreing it up. Just like that last time we did the painting, and just get more comfortable with it. Just after a little bit.
Yeah, you know,
Right, half an hour in,
keep practicing, then that's how it always kind of works out. You know, and if you do that all the time, then you get real good at it.
All Jabba's folds. Ah. Uh-oh. Got a fine line out there. Okay. Back to the airbrush, yeah?
Yeah, getting in some of the little spots that are just easier.
All right, well, I think we're gonna call this a day for this first episode.
Yeah.
We're gonna continue on repainting our toys, and later on in the week, we're gonna tackle on just some other toys as well.
Sure.
But we want to see you finish that Rancor, and you can follow along as well. Just go to tested.com/membership to sign up, or /premium to check out all our premium videos, and we'll have another video for everyone later on showing that full disassembly of the airbrush.
Yep.
This is a lot of fun. I still need a lot of work, a lot of practice.
Yep.
The Rancor.
I've only got the base coat
We've only
done.
got the base coat
on. A lot of area
on.
to cover.
It's gonna be really exciting to see how that turns out. And again, check that out on tested.com. Until then, we'll see you next time.